So welcome once again, because I hadn't started the recording, so I just turned it on now. Welcome to this webinar on gut health. And as you know, and if you've worked with any functional medicine doctor or worked with me or Dr. Iyer or any one of us, you know that we always start with the gut first, because the gut is the foundation for everything else that is going on with your health. So if your gut is not healthy, it is extremely difficult for everything else in your body to function well. And sometimes, interestingly, some of the symptoms that are probably a problem originating in the gut do not necessarily show up in the gut. That is something which a lot of people find difficult to understand. In fact, before I was a functional medicine specialist, I would never have thought that, unhealthy gut could show up as, headaches or skin rash or any of that. Of course, I have learned a lot, and I'm still learning new stuff almost every day. So I'm going to start with sharing a PowerPoint. Uh, Sorry. Okay, I think you can all see my screen. Okay. And in case you have any challenge, please feel free to type in the chat option at the bottom of your screen. So basically, these webinars are, I realized that many of you have some idea of what we do in functional medicine. Some of you have no idea what functional medicine is. And some of you have a lot of questions, wondering whether this is the right way for you to look at your health or, uh, but the most important point is most of you do a lot of research on the internet. And most of the time your research brings you to someone like me or any other functional medicine doctor for that matter, because you want a more natural way to health. And I'm using air quotes because the definition of natural is different for different people. So it would depend on what is your definition of natural. The important thing to remember is all food is natural. So why do some people have food sensitivities? Why do some people have problems when they eat a certain kind of food? Because food is natural, so it should be okay, right? So this is where the nuance of the practice and of what you can do comes up. So this is how traditionally in Western medicine, I was trained as an OBGY. So I used to only deal with the uterus, tubes, and ovaries. Now I gave up OBGY a while ago, and I transitioned into functional medicine. The interesting thing is, there was a time when it was, specialists were the only way to look at your health. But the fact is, though we looked at, gastroenterology, cardiology, OBGY, endocrinology, nephrology, psychiatry as separate, entities, and they were more like, independent silos, your body does not function like silos. Like your brain hasn't been told that in Western medicine that is neurology, so you cannot be talking to the gut, or you cannot be talking to the heart, or any of the other places in the other organs in the body. So though this construct of different specialties is important, because obviously it's absolutely impossible for one person to know everything in every specialty, at the same time, it is sort of an artificial construct in the sense that your body is not built like that. So it's whatever happens in one part of the body would impact, things in other parts of your body as well. So in functional medicine, we look at your health as a network of networks. So basically what happens is, like I said, every organ is talking to every other organ. Then you have your blood. Blood is such an important part, because this network of blood vessels and veins and lymphatics, all of them are connected. And obviously if they are connected, they would impact, whatever happens in one part of your body would impact other parts of your body as well. So what are the different areas we look at when when one of you, either you're already working with me or with Dr. Iyer or any one of us, or you are thinking of, so this is the big shift in change. So just as you are going to look at your body as different, everything is interrelated to, connected to everything else. Likewise, even as a physician, I had to start looking at the body as a whole rather than just as this organ, just the heart, just the brain, just the tubes and ovaries, and just the gut. So that major change in thinking, sometimes it takes time for a lot of people to go through that. So when we look at your health, and this is, for want of a better word, I call this my constellation. So my constellation includes all these 12 areas where now obviously there are a whole lot more other sub areas and all those things, but these are the 12 major ones that we need to address if we are going to think of, if we are going to look at, optimal health. Chronic inflammation. Now, chronic inflammation is something that, is related to about 95% of major diseases in the world. So whether you're talking about heart disease, high blood pressure, stroke, dementia, mood disorders, autoimmunity, any gastroenterological problems, gut issues, everything is related to chronic inflammation. So definitely reducing your levels of inflammation is extremely important. And in a functional medicine approach, we always start with food first, because food can cause inflammation for many of you. And it's not like there's just one type of food that is inflammatory. Yes, some foods are generally known as increasing inflammation in general. Things like processed food, sugar, simple carbohydrates, things that come in boxes and bags, which contain a whole bunch of, preservatives, colorings, food colorings, artificial flavors, then a whole lot of things that are not really food, and as we call them, food like substances. So those are the things which are inflammatory in general. However, we need to do a deeper dive, because sometimes it's not just like I said, whatever is natural may not always be the best thing for you, because if you have food sensitivities, that can show up as inflammation. Next is your body's biological clock, or your circadian rhythm. So the body's biological clock is, so when you wake up in the morning, what did our hunter-gatherer ancestors do? They woke up with sunrise, they looked at the sun, so the sunlight falls on the eyes, and that starts the big, body clock in the brain. And that clock in the brain is connected to every other, cell in the body. So each organ has clocks, and each cell has clocks. And interestingly, that clock is also still there in human cells on a petri dish in the lab. So that is how important. And that that body clock triggers your metabolism. It triggers different, making different hormones. Now, in case you've wondered why you need to go to the lab in the morning, sometimes because let us say for thyroid function tests, why do you need to go in the morning? Because TSH, just as TSH, T4, T3, all these hormones and all the other hormones as well, they are not present at a constant level in the body all the time. So they go up and then they go down, then they, sometimes they achieve sort of a plateau, and then they may go up again. And different hormones and different, processes in the body have this sort of a biological rhythm. Now, why is that biological rhythm important? Because everything is decided by that. Your metabolism is one of the big ones that is decided by, how well your body's biological clock functions. And how are we disrupting that clock? One of the big ways is how we live our life. So what are the things that are triggers for the clock? One is light falling on your eyes. The next thing is intake of food. So when you start eating food. Third is temperature. So these are the three big ones. Then there is exercise. And exercise, of course, if you exercise in the morning or whatever time you exercise, that also raises your body temperature. And body temperature is extremely important for so many different functions. One of the biggest is sleep. So your body temperature has to rise in the morning and fall in the evening. So unless your body temperature falls in the evening, you may not get a good night's sleep. So if you exercise in the evening, then that may raise your body temperature too much, so that by the time it's bedtime, your body's core temperature has not fallen enough for you to go to get a good night's sleep. Then so the other big one is, because I'm talking about the gut today and food is a big part, is how often you eat, and over what kind of an interval of, your how big your eating window is. Are you eating continuously throughout the day and night? Because food is easily available now. It's not like back when our hunter gatherer ancestors they had to hunt for their food, and unless they did that, they wouldn't get any food. Now we just need to go to the grocery store, or sometimes you don't even need to go there, we just order it online. So easy availability of food has probably been one of the major problems with our life now, because it's easily available. So, okay, I'll just have, maybe it's maybe just natural good food, good healthy nuts, and you just decide to have them. So we eat almost continuously throughout the day and sometimes well into the night if we are not conscious of what we are doing. Then comes, environmental toxins. Environmental toxins, there are so many chemicals, in the atmosphere, in the water we drink, in the soil, in most importantly, in the kind of the stuff that we use on our skin, in our cleaning products. Many of those substances have been found to be hormone disrupting chemicals. So, endocrine disrupting chemicals, EDCs, are a very big problem nowadays. Many of them impact your thyroid health. Of course, they impact your gut as well. They impact in so many different ways. And worst of all, many of them have, they have influence over the newborn baby because of the mother's exposure to all these chemicals and, hormone disrupting chemicals in the uterus. Then comes exercise and movement. Yes, all of you know that you need to exercise, but more than, exercise, yes, exercise is extremely important. And the only benefit from exercise is not weight loss. We'll talk about that some other time. But what I like to focus on is your daily movement. Now, interestingly, Canada has come up with a guideline of 24 hours daily movement guidelines, which is really fantastic, because one of the things that happens is, by the nature of our jobs now, we spend a lot of time just sitting. So the reason I've got myself a laptop stand, and I'm standing now, and I make it a point to stand, because as it is, I spend a lot of time sitting. Because when I'm consulting with patients, or I'm, doing research for some of my articles or any of that, I do spend a lot of time sitting. So to interrupt that continuous sitting, what are the different things we can do? Now that is something I will talk about another day. So most important is to interrupt continuous sitting. Do not sit continuously for 5-6 hours a day. That is actually considered to be worse than even smoking. So this is called, the sitting disease, but it's of course not a new disease. What it does is it completely messes up your metabolism. It reduces your muscle mass dramatically. And I know a lot of people in the audience are there who have asked me about their muscle mass, because they find that the muscle mass is reducing. And muscle mass is not just how you look and all that. Most importantly, muscle is metabolically very active. So how much muscle you have will also decide how your body processes, blood glucose, blood sugar, how it processes carbohydrates. And for long-term health, your muscle mass will decide how, stable your body is, in the sense that will you fall easily because you don't have enough muscle. So balance is extremely important for long-term health, because particularly in the older years, you don't want to fall and break some bones, because in the older population, it has been seen that uh, any fall and a resulting fracture from that can sometimes, completely change their lives. Many people don't ever get out of bed again. So that is preparation for, older age starts when you're way younger. So exercise, movement. Then of course food is the most important thing that we focus on, because that is the foundation. So I'll talk more about food in a while. Genes and genetics. Obviously your genes do not decide your destiny, and epigenetics is basically, are your genes switching on or switching off? So when I say your genes do not decide your destiny, what do I mean by that? What it means basically is, let us say you have the genes for diabetes, and diabetes is not one gene, it's multiple genes. So most of these chronic diseases are what is called in our world as polygenic. So it's not a single gene problem, it's many genes. Each gene has probably a tiny impact, but together they can cause a lot of problems. So those genes have to be turned on to be expressed. So, and this turning on and turning off mechanism is decided to a great extent by your lifestyle. So let us say you have the genes for diabetes, and but then you are someone who eats a very low carbohydrate diet, or you use time restricted eating, you don't eat in certain intervals of the day, and you exercise regularly, you have enough muscle mass, then your chances of developing diabetes would be way less than even your identical twin who would have the same genes. But if your identical twin doesn't do these things, he or she may develop diabetes, but you don't, because you haven't switched on those diabetes genes by because of the good habits and lifestyle that you have. Gut immune brain is so big. It's like so the gut is considered to be the second brain. Now, the brain in the gut is not really. So there is a lot of nervous system tissue in the gut, which impacts the brain. But this is not like the part of the brain that we are more interested in, the CEO of your brain, your impulse control, and how you achieve your goals. Not that part of the brain, but things like mood. Mood is a big one that is impacted by gut. So obviously, if mood is impacted by gut, food has a huge impact on how you feel in terms of your mood, your anxiety, depression, a lot of things. However, it's not as simplistic as that. That is one component, but that's not the only component. Chronic inflammation has a huge impact on your mood issues as well. Hormones, of course, it's not just the sex hormones like testosterone, DHEA, and in women estrogen, progesterone, and women make testosterone as well, and men make estrogen too. So it's a balance of all the hormones. Then there is of course insulin, cortisol, parathyroid hormone, thyroid hormones. There are so many hormones, and of course all of them have a huge impact on how your body functions. And again, it's a network of networks. So what happens in one part would impact in other parts of your body as well. Medications, one big area is, many of the prescription medications that you're taking, some of them cause nutrient depletion. And if you've worked with me, you know that I make you go to put all your medications through a website called Mytavin, mytavin.com. So you can go to that site, put in your medications, and you'll come up with a list of the most common nutrient depletions. So one of the commonest is, for example, statin medication, the cholesterol lowering medication, that can reduce your levels of something called CoQ10. So CoQ10 is extremely important for your cellular energy production. So if CoQ10 is reduced in your body, and as you age, your levels of CoQ10 would also reduce. So what happens is, with age, your CoQ10 is going down. Along with that, you are taking a statin medication. Now, you should not stop your statin medication, of course, but the thing is, with the medication, your CoQ10 levels fall even further, and you are experiencing fatigue or lack of energy, and you want trying to figure out, I eat well, and why does this keep happening to me? So that could be nutrient depletions are a big one. Then things like metformin causing deficiencies of B vitamins, B12 particularly. And if you are vegetarian, as a lot of my patients in India are vegetarian, then it is nearly impossible for you to get adequate B12 vitamins unless you supplement. So medications causing nutrient depletion is a big area. Then medications interact with each other. And there are a lot of tools available online for you to check. Medications also interact with your supplements. So those are very important to bear in mind. Then, of course, metabolic dysfunction. So weight gain, weight loss, insulin resistance, and I'm not talking about insulin resistance today. If you've heard me speak before, you know that, insulin resistance is basically your body's ability to, or rather your body's impaired ability to process carbohydrates. Essentially, the body's hormone insulin does not function the best it should. That impacts your metabolic dysfunction in a very big way. And so it's not just the food. Let us say you eat your last meal of the day by like 8 p.m. or 8:30 p.m. Maybe that is a time for a lot of people, that is a time when the hormone insulin doesn't function its best. So that is impacting the time you eat your food, is impacting the blood sugar response to it. So if the same food you're eating earlier in the day, maybe that is not going to have the same high blood glucose response as it happens when you eat later in the day. So metabolic dysfunction is again related to your body's biological clock. Stress is related to everything else. And, because of the ongoing pandemic, all of us are going through unbelievable amount of stress. But the important thing is, how are you dealing with that stress? So stress can be, recently there are a lot of studies coming out which have suggested that it's how you look at stress. Are you looking at stress as stress is debilitating, or stress is, enhancing your performance? That is also a big one. Targeted supplementation. I'm going to talk about targeted supplementation in one of the webinars later on. I think it's webinar number 6, if I'm right. So basically, my point is, just addressing one part of your health, just one area, let us say just addressing your gut or food, yes, it will make you feel better. And some people feel dramatically better in a very short span of time. But what happens is, if you haven't addressed all the other areas, you're not going to feel your best. And this takes time. So it's like if you are just meeting me for one consultation and I just go through your history and I give you a list of labs and things like that. And second meeting, we talk about what are your labs telling you. And then after that, we come up with a plan together. And after the third visit, you decide, okay, I know what to do now. I don't need to meet the doctor very soon again. But what happens is, very often, number one, we have not addressed all the different challenges with your health. Maybe we have just addressed your food and gut, but we still have to focus on circadian rhythm, chronic inflammation. Is there any other area of your life where are you having, gum inflammation? So periodontal disease can be a source of inflammation, chronic inflammation. So if we have ruled out the gut and your inflammation levels, and you can check your blood inflammation levels through a blood test, if your chronic inflammation levels remain high, we need to dig deeper to figure out where that inflammation is coming from. So obviously, with just, one or two visits a year or 3 visits a year, we cannot address everything. And doing too much together is also extremely overwhelming for most people. So bottom line is, if you feel that, okay, I have, I'm feeling better than I was when I first started off, but I'm not feeling my best. So maybe that is because all these other areas have not been addressed properly. Then, so today, as I said, now I wanted to talk about food, because food is the foundation for, everything else that is going on in your life. This is something that I want to really stress upon, is you cannot out supplement or out exercise or out anything, a poor diet. And when I say poor diet, it doesn't necessarily mean like, what you don't think is what you think is a healthy diet. When I say poor diet, I mean food that is right for you. And what is right for you may be quite different from what is right for somebody else. So that is because sometimes I get a lot of patients say, doctor, just tell me about this supplement. Should I use this one or should I use that one? And my request is always, let us start with the basics first. Unless you've managed your food, your sleep, your movement, your stress management, supplements will not work in isolation. For supplements to get absorbed in your body, your gut has to work really well. So when we talk about the gut healing program, and I'm sure many of you have received this handout from me about the 5R program of gut healing. So what is the 5R program? So this is remove, replace, reinoculate, repair, and rebalance. If you've received the handout from me, you will know that what these are in detail. So I'll just talk briefly about them. First is, what are the things we want to remove? Food sensitivities are the biggest one. And today I'll talk a little more in details about food sensitivities. Then comes, parasites, bacteria, yeast, H. pylori. So H. pylori is also a bacteria in the stomach. Does it need to be removed in everyone? I don't think so. Then again, depending on where in the world you are. In countries like India, H. pylori infection is very common. However, in countries like Canada, it's not as common. So does it need to be removed in everyone? Probably not, though H. pylori has been associated with stomach cancer. My point in bringing up H. pylori is we don't start with addressing H. pylori first or parasites first. Food sensitivities will come way above everything else. So again, going back to my, the problem of it's a process. So if you've done some of it and not all of it, you may not be getting all the results. So food sensitivity is the biggest one. We need to remove the food that are not working for you. Next is, what do we replace with? So replacement with digestive enzymes, hydrochloric acid, bile acids. Now, sometimes it's not like these, each of these are like remove, replace are absolutely watertight compartments. Sometimes we may start off with, removing and replacing at the same time. It would depend on what is going on with you. But most of the time, some things like, hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid is not something I would, recommend you start testing for before you finished your food sensitivity assessment, before you've added, maybe you've added some probiotics. So, but what happens again, it's like I said, it's a process. So if you've not gone through the process, then maybe we are missing out on low stomach acid in you. And low stomach acid is quite a big problem for a lot of people, because one of the things is a lot of people are on PPIs. So proton pump inhibitors are medications for, reflux, like lansoprazole, omeprazole, rabiprazole, whole lot of those prazoles that are there. They are not meant for long-term use. They cause a lot of problems. Nutrient depletions is a big one. In fact, use of PPIs has been associated with, early death. So they are not meant for long-term use at all. Then re-inoculate. So address gut dysbiosis. How do we do that? Again, it goes back to food, because food is one of the biggest, has the biggest impact on how your gut functions. Then comes medications as well. And it's not just antibiotics. Whole lot of other prescription medications other than antibiotics can also impact your gut function and gut bacteria. So gut dysbiosis is basically, having not necessarily abnormal gut bacteria, but maybe your gut bacteria are not functioning at their best. And for your, again, this is not about the gut microbiome. Maybe I'm going to have another webinar on the gut microbiome. So what does your gut bugs need to function well? They need food. And what is their food? Those are the prebiotics. So the prebiotics are food for your gut bacteria. In my world, food is actually signals to your genes. Food is signals to your gut microbiome. So all these things are extremely important. So prebiotics, ideally, where would we want our prebiotics to come from? Definitely, we would like it to come from food. So food, fiber present in vegetables, fiber present in fruit. That is the reason we recommend that you eat the whole vegetable or the whole fruit rather than putting it into a smoothie where a lot of the fiber is gone. So unless you feed your gut bugs the right kind of food, they are not going to function at their best. The probiotics are usually a combination of a bunch of different types of, bacteria. And for some of you, you may need a very high dose of probiotics. And sometimes probiotics come with a small amount of prebiotics with them. So depending on, what your symptoms are, and I'm coming to the symptoms later on, We usually start off with the probiotics sometimes at the very first visit, because if you have a lot of gut symptoms, probiotics can sometimes help you dramatically. But of course, it's going to also depend on the quality of the probiotics and what is in those capsules. Then comes repair. So again, you might be deficient in zinc. Now, L-glutamine is a very important, gut healing supplement. Then a whole bunch of antioxidants. You may not be having enough vitamin A, vitamin C, B, all these ones. Sometimes, if you are deficient in zinc, now zinc particularly is very important, not just for your gut. Zinc is important for about 300 different enzymatic reactions in your body. And now, given the ongoing pandemic, zinc is extremely important for your immune system. So if we find that you are deficient in zinc, after you do your labs, we are not going to wait for the repair phase. We are going to put you on zinc. Now, how much zinc should you take? Again, just because something is good or you're deficient in it doesn't mean you need to take like huge doses of something, because zinc and copper have to be in balance. So if you take too much of zinc, your copper levels may go down, and that itself can cause anemia and a whole lot of other problems. So like I said, everything is connected to everything else. So then comes rebalance. And again, as you can see, rebalance is like your sleep, stress management, movement, exercise, everything impacts everything else. So if you have addressed only one part and not the others, then that is probably the missing piece for you, and you need to work on that. So going back to the remove, food sensitivities. So what do we always recommend? If you have already worked with any functional medicine doctor, you'll know that the first thing we tell you to do is let us see what food you're sensitive to. And some of you have already gone through this gut symptoms questionnaire that I have on my website. And I'm coming up with a newer one. It is going to be the same symptoms, but it will be in a much better format. For some reason, this particular score, if any of you have tried it recently, you will realize that it's not giving you the score. So basically what it does is there are a series of symptoms, and it can be bloating, pain, diarrhea, what kind of stool do you have, bleeding with your with passing stool. Whole lot of things are listed there, and there is a scale from 0 to 10, so you can specify how much that bothers you. So at the end of it, it is supposed to come up with a score, so mild, moderate, or severe. Now, those of you who have mild problems, you may not need a very, very restrictive diet. So when I talk about restrictive diet, many of you are already familiar with a low FODMAP diet or an autoimmune diet or no lectin diet, or I don't know, whole lot of different diets that are available. So do you really need, let us say, a low FODMAP diet? Today, I'm not talking about the low FODMAP, but a low FODMAP diet is a very restrictive diet, and it's extremely difficult for most people to stick to that. That is one factor. The another big problem is for a lot of the Asian foods and the Indian food, we don't know what the FODMAP content is. So do all of you need a low FODMAP diet? Sometime back, I was recording a video with a very well-known gastroenterologist from India. He's a specialist at a very academic institution. And so he said, we recommend a low FODMAP diet for people with IBS. And I told him, I said, I'm going to challenge you and suggest that maybe you need to try a little less restrictive diet in some of your patients, and see how they do. Maybe they don't need such a severely restricted diet like a low FODMAP diet. So what kind of restricted diet you're going to eat will, number one, depend on your gut symptoms questionnaire. But I think more than the score, what it will depend upon is what you are willing to do. A lot of my patients, they are like, oh, if I'm going to not going to eat gluten, I'm not going to eat grains, I'm not going to eat sugar, I'm not going to eat yogurt and any of that, what will I eat? And sometimes our relationship with food is more psychological, emotional, rather than the nutrients it provides. So Gluten is one of the big ones I sometimes get pushback from. And again, the fact is, unless you try, so getting off of gluten and then see how you do. And again, some of you, I have asked you to reintroduce and see how you feel. However, if you have an autoimmune condition, I don't recommend you reintroduce gluten at all. So most importantly, are you willing to give up some of those foods? And this is temporarily, this is not for life. But particularly with gluten, again, gluten will cover in another webinar again. uh, 95% of my patients feel so much better when they stop eating gluten that they never want to go back to it. So that is something very important. It'll depend on what you're willing to do, and of course your gut symptoms questionnaire. And I am kind of like, I don't recommend a very restricted diet from the very beginning. But yes, you do need to start off with the basic elimination. Then comes, lab testing. So this is again different. It means different things for in different parts of the world. In countries like Canada, your provider has to recommend, and it is a specialized testing. It's not available in healthcare. And in India, unfortunately, what happens is many of you just go to the lab and you say, I want to do a food testing, and what you end up doing is what is a food allergy test. Now, food sensitivity is not food allergy, number one. So it's not an IgA problem. But like I said, in India, it's very easy to just go and get yourself tested. So some of you have sent your samples to Germany, I think, with quite an expensive test. It's about the equivalent of $500 or $600. And what happens is, yes, it's an IgG test, but sometimes IgG may be positive. So IgA, IgG, these are immunoglobulins, immune substances in your body. IgG may be positive not because you're sensitive to a particular food, it's just because you've been exposed to it. So bottom line is, I don't recommend testing, because in terms of the amount of information I get, doing a good elimination diet gives us way more information, and it's for free, than doing all the testing in the world. But some of you need to know what the testing shows. And as I was telling somebody that day, some of my patients are like what I call testing junkies. They'll do all the tests possible in the world, and then they're completely overwhelmed because they're not able to go to the next step. I said, okay, you've done this test, but are you following that rotation diet, where you're supposed to eliminate these and reintroduce and all that? No, that doesn't always happen with everybody. And I'm still trying to figure out what makes some people testing junkies and not taking any action. In fact, recently I told a patient, I said, you need to stop testing and just start doing things rather than testing more and more. So the basic elimination diet is what we call, some people call it the prudent diet or the real food diet. So basically, no sugar, no processed food, no preservatives, food coloring, additives, no gluten, no grains, no vegetable oils. When it comes to dairy, you need to figure out which part of dairy you're sensitive to. Now, some people may be sensitive to milk, but they're absolutely fine with cheeses. Some people may be sensitive to cow milk, but they're fine with goat milk or any other milk. So each of these, it's not about the entire group of dairy. Like some of you will tell me, oh, I know I'm lactose intolerant. I said, no, it may not be lactose, it could be something else. So if you have problems, your stomach starts gurgling when you drink milk, stop having milk. But maybe you'll be fine with cheeses or with yogurt. So you need to figure out which particular food is causing the problem rather than an entire group. So that is important. Then comes, should you stop alcohol, caffeine, soy, corn? So in North America, the commonest food sensitivities are gluten, dairy, soy, and corn. But again, it depends. Like I said, are you willing to do a restrictive diet? So for 2 weeks you give up all this stuff. Alcohol, for some of you, alcohol is not a big problem, so it's not difficult giving up. And caffeine is another big one. Are you dependent on your caffeine, or is it just something you like to drink? And again, coffee has a whole lot more caffeine than tea. So it depends. Some of you, oh, like you feel like you're being deprived of everything. So that is when you need to ask yourself, how are you looking at the elimination diet? Are you looking at it as something I'm going to be deprived for the rest of my life? Or are you looking at doing the elimination diet to move towards much better health? So if you're going towards something good versus thinking of deprivation, you are probably going to be, open to trying a whole lot more stuff. So again, caffeine, soy, corn, you need to figure out which one's bothering you. So going back to, again, food is one component, and like I said, you need to address all these other areas. So what was happening all this time, and that is the reason I decided I need to do more educational events and webinars, so that you don't have to spend your build time talking with me and me explaining what I'm thinking and how I'm looking at any of your health conditions. So what I was doing so far is, if you are my patient, you know that I've given you a set of PDFs, and most of those PDFs contained recipes, which were, if you are from India, you were wondering, because they had a whole lot of Western recipes. And if you are in North America, you know that you went through, this was like a 64-page document or something. And I would assume that I'm going to give you this document and you're going to be able to do this by yourself. What I found is many of you struggle. See, not all of us work the same way. For some of us, it's like, okay, just give me the instructions and I will follow them to the T, and you can do that. Uh, Not everyone's like that. Some of you need more, help every day kind of thing, or reminders, not even so much of help. It's more to do with reminders. So that's why my wonderful associate, Mikhal, and we are coming up with a basic elimination diet email course. The price of that course is way less than what it would cost to work with either Mikhail or me. So that is not ready yet. But what it essentially will do, the course, is you're going to receive emails maybe every morning with what you're going to do for that day. Now, I like to break down things into simple stuff so that you're not overwhelmed. See, all of you have busy lives. I mean, you can't be just, oh, today should I eat this, or is this causing me a problem? Rather than doing that, why don't I try to make it simpler? So yes, that is my goal for this basic elimination diet email course. And I think that is the last slide. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box at the bottom. Next month, the topic is hypothyroidism. Again, thyroid is intimately related to the gut, and thyroid is intimately related to your liver. So very important. And hypothyroidism is so common all over the world. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box, and you will receive a recording of this webinar. Okay, one question. How long do I need to be on an elimination diet? Very good question. Usually, so how you do the elimination diet is for 2 weeks, you eliminate the list of food that I have mentioned. Sometimes we also give you a list of just what kind of food you should give up. Don't eat those foods for 2 weeks. Then the most important part comes where you reintroduce these food and see if you react to them. Now you reintroduce the food, and then what are the things you need to look for? So sometimes the symptoms have nothing to do with the gut. You could be having a headache or a rash, or it gives you a migraine. So for 3 days, don't reintroduce a new food. So start with the one that you miss the most, the reintroduction phase. But most importantly, you need to track your symptoms on, I usually send a handout, but like I said, not everyone is going to sit and, very methodically write down everything. But that is where you're going to get most of the information about the troublesome food for you. So if a food, you found that something is causing a problem for you, you're coming up with either gut symptoms like bloating, diarrhea, stomach pain, or any of that, or skin rash, then you know that that food is troublesome for you. So usually I recommend that you give it up for at least 3 to 6 months. Now, gluten is different. If you have an autoimmune condition, I don't recommend you ever reintroduce gluten. And I'll talk more about gluten on the webinar on leaky gut. Not gluten. Let us say it is dairy. So let us say it is cow milk or something like that. So reintroduce and eat a generous quantity of it, not like a little bit of it, because that won't be enough to challenge your immune system. So after that, so obviously it's a process. So if you are looking at reintroducing 10 different food, it is not going to be over in 1 week, because every 3 days you're supposed to reintroduce a new food. And then for the next 3 days, you're supposed to track the symptoms. So sometimes some of the symptoms may show up a little late. They may show up after 48 hours. So that is very important to figure out. So if you have found that certain food are, bothersome for you, that's your body telling you don't eat these, at least not until 3 to 6 months. So an elimination diet is not for life. An elimination diet is for you to figure out which are the troublesome food for you. And some of you have already done it. But one thing that I still cannot understand is, that this particular food gives you, it causes problems for you. It gives you, maybe gluten gives you foggy thinking. But then some of you decide that, okay, I'm just going to try a little bit of gluten tomorrow and see how it goes. I would suggest don't do that. Like recently I was talking to a patient and he said, oh, I found gluten is causing a problem, but I thought, let me try a little bit and see. Now I'm like, my eyes are probably almost reaching the ceiling. I'm saying, why do you want to challenge your immune system, when you know that this food is not helping you? So that is basically, and again, it's like each one of you is different and each one of you have a different life situation. So best is to figure out what works best for you. So that would be, so yes, an elimination diet is not for life, but ideally take away the troublesome food for 3 to 6 months. And then you can reintroduce and see if you continue to react, because sometimes you don't react later on when you reintroduce that food. Okay, so if you don't have any more questions, I am going to conclude this webinar. Thank you so much for investing your time with me, and see you next month. Bye now.